Our guest today has previously written about how the US President Donald Trump's recent actions seem to be designed to demonstrate that it's still the dominant global power and it's capable of bullying weak nations into following America's lead. And this was on display for the world to see during Trump's hosting of the Ukraine leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, at the White House. But it wasn't just that incident. It was a week of confrontation. Not one, not two, but three European leaders in the Oval Office. The first was with the French President, Emmanuel Macron. Next was with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister. And then on Friday was Volodymyr Zelensky. Let's have a listen.
That he's really in charge.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total default, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear,
we wanted to have a little bit of what the European nations had. You know, they get their money back by giving money. We don't get the money back. Biden made a deal. He put in $350 billion. And I thought it was a very unfair situation.
We're not getting all of ours. I mean, quite a bit of ours was gifted. It was given. There were some loans, but mainly it was gifted, actually.
We have our military equipment. This war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days.
Which
three European leaders in the Oval Office doesn't appear to be a friendly place if you're an international leader that is at odds with Donald Trump. Professor Daniel Bradlow is a G20 senior fellow for the SA Institute of International Affairs. Good morning, Daniel. Really appreciate your time. I'm going to go out on a limb and say South Africa really shouldn't be bothering sending a delegation to the United States to have any face-to-face with anyone in the Trump White House if that is the reception that they are going to receive. South Africa, not a very, very close ally, a partner of the United States. But if that is how you're treating your closest of allies, I don't think there's anywhere a friendly place in a Donald Trump White House at the moment, Daniel.
Good morning, Lester, and good morning to the listeners. Clearly, the White House is not a very friendly place for a number of countries. Trump has already attacked South Africa over the expropriation bill and other issues incorrectly. The US has also shown its disdain for the international community by not sending the Secretary of State the Secretary of the Treasury of the US to the G20 meetings that were hosted in South Africa in the last couple of weeks. But on the other hand, and this is always the dilemma with dealing with the US is a very important trading partner for South Africa. If we antagonize them and lose access to the US markets, that would have a serious impact on South Africa. So that we need to protect that. The dollar is still the most important currency in the world and the center of the international financial system. And so we're dependent on that. So there is some reason to make an effort to at least maintain reasonable working relations with the US. I don't think we should be under any illusion that even a desire to become too close to the US. The world's a very dangerous place at the moment, and it's a very fast-moving, changing place. And so I think it's important for South Africa to preserve its options for as long as possible. Yeah. And that means maintaining some sort of working relationship with the US.
So where does South Africa's allies, partners, commonalities in global outlook lie? There's been a call for what is called the Global South to use this opportunity with a vacuum in European leadership, in American leadership, to now step into to offer real political leadership in a time now where it seems as if we're stripping away what one would argue could be diplomatic fakery. It's all about nice gestures and handshakes and pleasantries, but really in the background it's all about what is in a state's self-interest. Do you think that South Africa, along with global South partners, could step in what is now clearly a moral leadership void?
I think South Africa has to look carefully at who its allies are. It clearly has important allies in the global south, but it also has important allies in the global north, including some individual European nations. The European Union is still, as a group, is an important partner for South Africa in trade. So I think that South Africa has to maneuver through that. I think one of the lessons of history is that South Africa has to think in a very clear-eyed way about what are the opportunities and what are the risks here, and how do we maneuver through that as independently as possible, preserving whatever options we can and promoting our interests as much as possible, both for ourselves and for the region. It's not just about South Africa, it's about Southern Africa and the continent as a whole.
Daniel, I listened quite intently to the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, speaking at the African Union Summit 2 weekends ago, where she called on countries within the African diaspora, countries within the Caribbean and Latin America, for greater cooperation. This is under the larger banner of sustainability, of equality. Just what is going to be needed for some sort of behind-the-scenes machination of greater cooperation between South Africa, other African countries, Latin America, and particularly the Caribbean, Daniel?
So I think Mia Mottley has been a real leader in the world in promoting a new way of looking things through the Barbados initiatives that she's undertaken and in the kinds of speeches that you mentioned. I think one of the lessons both from her and generally is that it's a kind of active non-alignment that we need, where we actually look at very specific issues and say on this particular issue. So for example, financing for development, the debt burden in Africa, dealing with the climate issues, the sustainable development goals. On each of those individual issues, who are the countries with which we have the most in common? And can we form an alliance with or an alliance of a willing group of countries like that can join together to promote our interest on that particular issue? On a different issue, it would be a different group of countries, some in the north, some in the south. But I think we have to be open to those possibilities.
Cyril Ramaphosa is still open to a possibility of dialogue with Donald Trump. Heard him on the sidelines of the G20 Finance Ministers Summit in Cape Town last week. Firstly, he sketched his philosophy of communication. He likes to wait till the dust has settled. Donald Trump thrives in chaos, but he's also hoping to invite Donald Trump to South Africa, maybe even on an official state visit. The US takes over the presidency of the G20 after South Africa. So in terms of that organization, we're joined at the hip. Would it be worthwhile for Cyril Ramaphosa to say, please, Donald, come over, let's have a cup of tea, let's play a round of golf, and let's share a peace pipe here between our two countries?
So, I mean, as you say, the transition from South Africa to the US as the leadership of the G20 will take place as long as the G20 holds together this year. And then if that's the case, the summit will take place in November and Donald Trump will come as the leader of the US. And for President Ramaphosa to use that as an opportunity to promote better ties with Trump is a good opportunity. It would be crazy to let that go by without trying to exploit it. I think we can't wait till November alone. We have to be developing the relationships well before that as well. And in that sense, I think it's the job of the president, however, whatever he might think personally of Donald Trump, that he has to reach out and try and make relations between South Africa and the United States work well. Yeah. We shouldn't forget that we're one of the big beneficiaries of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act in the US, which gives free trade access or preferential trade access to South African exports to the US. That bill comes up for renewal this year. It's not clear that it will be renewed, and it's not clear that South Africa will be included in that renewal. But if President Ramaphosa has to play a round of golf in order to get us included in that renewal, it seems to me that's a price worth paying for the sake of our country.
Speaking about a round of golf, a friend of mine sent me a list of who should be South Africa's dream team. If we probably will send a delegation to Washington. Just like your thoughts on this. Friend of mine says Gary Player is a great golfer, patriotic South African, and a close friend of Donald Trump. Sends Alan Busak, who has tentacles within the United States. Leila Fourie, CEO of the JSE. Kgalema Motlanthe, former president. Mary Slack, blue blood of South African business empire. Ibrahim Rasool Louise, the ambassador to the United States, and also, interestingly, Julia Ingel Bertelsmann, who is the daughter of Rhoda Kadal, who is the wife of Joel Pollack, who is the presumptive or the rumored ambassador of the United States to South Africa. Who should be in South Africa's negotiation team to the US?
Well, that's an interesting list. I'm not sure it would be my list. There are a couple of people on that list that I would definitely not include on the list. I think it's important. I mean, the instinct is correct that the list should include some important stakeholders in South Africa, from business, from labor, from civil society, from government. But it should also include some people that will appeal to Donald Trump. Maybe Charlize Theron would be a better bet than Gary Player, but that's up to President Ramaphosa to decide.
Really appreciate your time, Professor Daniel Bradlow of the Institute of International Affairs.